From the U.S. Labor Department shows foreign-born workers drove the expansion of America's workforce last year. Immigrants accounted for nearly 60% of that growth.
And despite a few signs of cooling, the U.S. labor market has mostly been resilient in the face of recession fears this year. Gabrielle Fahmy reports.
Miora Rabioni has been living in New York for almost 4 years now. She's from Madagascar. When this patisserie was looking to hire, she applied.
I do a little bit of everything, but I focus mainly on the machine, on barista. So I make drinks for customer. I do latte, cappuccino, hot chocolate, matcha.
The number of immigrants working in the U.S. has reached a record high. 1.8 million of them joined the labor force last year, compared with only 1.3 million Americans. When the pandemic led to the Great Resignation, with 50 million people quitting their jobs in just a year, it left employers scrambling. Industries like construction, manufacturing, and hospitality faced severe shortages.
A lot of employees that were born here, and they've kind of like, I don't want to say taken a step back, but they had an extra benefit with like government helping with unemployment and things like that. And I think immigrants don't have that luxury, so they're more than willing to kind of like jump on board and work those extra hours that you might not have with an employee that is on unemployment.
And for businesses like this one, it's been a lifeline. Arellano says it might have taken them twice as long to find staff after the pandemic otherwise. The number of foreign-born workers in the U.S. has been rising through the years. 20 years ago, they made up about 10% of the labor force. That number has almost doubled since then to close to 20%, or 1 in 5 workers. Historically, immigrants have played a pivotal role shaping the country. New York City was literally built on immigrants' work.
Immigrants have always, throughout the history of the United States, filled these gaps. So if you think about the history of New York, there have been immigrants have filled all of these very, very labor-intensive positions over time.
It's a question that's especially relevant these days with record numbers of migrants arriving in places like New York.
But let's be clear, buses are still coming.
In an effort to get federal money, the mayor of New York has time and again voiced how much of a strain on the city's finances the recent wave has been. And immigration opponents often argue foreign-born workers take jobs away from Americans. But for economists, it's quite the opposite. They say immigrants help shore up the economy when it needs it.
If a company has a production line that is missing people in key positions and it cannot fill those positions domestically, then there is a risk that that business will move abroad, where they can access labor.
And 3 years into the pandemic, there's still 3 million workers considered missing from the labor force. Retirements are largely to blame for the gap. And with many Americans aging out of the workforce in the coming years, it's likely the proportion of foreign-born workers will only keep rising. Gabrielle, Fahmy, CNA, New York.